There is so much shame that goes with it that you don't want to talk about it. You don't want people to know what happened to you because you get things, like, well, why didn't you just leave? Or, if it was so bad, why did you stay? And I did not want to hear that. People only see what they want you to see. So to stand in judgment of someone else is a reflection of you. It is a reflection of how you feel about yourself. And if you are going to judge someone else, look in the mirror. Don't drop anchor in victimhood. There is so much more life out there. Yes, it happened. Yes, it's the past. You have a whole future that you can now design.
Welcome to Through the Trauma podcast. My name is Amber Larkins, published photographer, storytelling expert, visual artist, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach. This podcast was born from one question: how do I get inspiring stories of triumph out to the people who need to hear them the most? Come with me, enter my world, where lives are getting changed, heroes are getting developed, and greatness is being achieved. And we're back with another episode of Through the Trauma podcast. I am Amber Larkins, your host, and today I have with me Miss Danielle Young. Now, Danielle is a domestic abuse survivor. She has now turned life coach and yoga teacher. She's committed to helping women and really find their strength and resilience. She takes yoga and coaching and mindfulness practices and blends all this together and really helps women overcome effects of abuse and the impact of abuse. She helps them reclaim their power and transform their pain into purpose. And if you know me, you know I'm huge on that as well. So Danielle and I highly align there. Danielle's mission is to support women in healing from their past and rediscovering their inner strength by stepping into their most powerful, fulfilling version of themselves. Danielle, I love what you're doing. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah. So this is a heavy topic that I feel like it gets talked about, but not always talked about in the severity. So I think sometimes it becomes a common term: domestic abuse, domestic violence, all the different terms that you can use for it. But does it really communicate the severity of what someone's going through, having gone through this type of abuse? What are your thoughts on that?
No, it doesn't. People think, abuse, violence, so it happens once you get over it. No, that's not how this works. The lasting effects, the abuse itself is, moments or however long. But the mental stays with you. The mental and the physical stays with you. Like, trauma is stored in the body. So if we don't work through it, it just stays with us. So people think, they associate, oh, well, you went through it, you're out of it, now you're better. No, that's not really how that works.
And, I find this with all different types of trauma, people that have gone through trauma with grief, or they've wrestled through trauma with, infidelity or divorce, or all different things. But I think domestic abuse it carries a lot of weight because a lot of times people are subjected to this for long periods of time. So it's not like an abuse that happens and then you move. It's like, now I can move from this one incident that happens and now grow, but it's just happening to you again and again and again. And a lot of times there's manipulation, and there's things that your abuser will tell you or do to you to be sure that you kind of stay in that mindset or stay in that place. And so I think this makes this trauma really hard to get over. It's like you said, we don't think about it if we've never been through it. And I fortunately have never been through, physical domestic abuse. But I've talked to a lot of people that have, and it's a heartbreaking thing. And, during COVID, I remember it just being heavy on my heart, thinking about the domestic violence that was happening inside of the homes, because they said there was an increase in domestic violence then. And it's just heartbreaking. And it's doing something to someone that is going to take a lot to get over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So before we jump in, because I want to touch on all of these things, and I definitely want your thoughts and opinions on all of this, but tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you moved into doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I started out, my abusive relationship was about 27 years ago, and I met him. He was quite a bit older. I was 18, he was 28, and I had an attachment wound that needed to be band-aided, and he fixed it. And I ignored the red flags, all of them. I just wanted the feeling that went with being with someone. I didn't grow up with my dad. He left. He was in and out of my life until he was sick, or until I was 6, and then he was gone. So I grew up thinking that my dad didn't love me. So when I met my abuser, he filled that gap. And the abuse didn't start off right away. It started off more mental, and with the manipulation and the jealousy and the domination and, the gaslighting that goes with, it sort of starts, minor, and then it just escalates. And that's exactly what happened over the course of 2 years. It escalated to one night it got violent and he tried to kill me. And that's when I left, and I had a 3-week-old baby at the time. And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. In the mix of that night, of that violent night, she was almost hurt. And I said, I can't do this. And so I packed her up and I left and said, this is it. I need to be a good mom for her, and I'm going to live my life the way that I want to live it. And that was the beginning of my healing journey. And it has not been easy. I went through I started off with therapy, and that didn't quite work for me. And so I just kept trying to find things that worked. And eventually, I got yoga. I found yoga. And that was really the catalyst to my healing. And I used that for several years. And then I had an opportunity a few years ago to become a trauma-informed yoga teacher. So that's what I did, and learned all the meditation and everything that went with that. And I still use that to this day. Then I started using self-inquiry. That was a game changer. EMDR was a big one too. That really helped me. So I've sort of compiled everything that I've learned and I've gone through, and now I teach it. I'm fortunately on the other side of the trauma. I've worked through most of it. There's still little pieces that come up here and there, but I have the tools now to work through it. And that's exactly what I teach. I wanted to become the person that I did not have back then. I did not have a lot of support in healing back then. I had my family, but with domestic abuse, there is so much shame that goes with it that you don't want to talk about it. You don't want people to know what happened to you, because you get things, like, well, why didn't you just leave? Or, if it was so bad, why did you stay? And I did not want to hear that, because at that point in time, I couldn't have dealt with that.
That's not helpful. That's not helpful
No.
at all for
No,
someone to
it's
say
not.
that. And I think sometimes people don't know what to say in situations like that. They just say, just comes out, right? But but it's not helpful at all. And I think one great thing even about a platform like this is that it raises awareness to people that maybe have never been through it, to get an understanding of what someone's dealing with, having gone through it, and then having to talk about it or heal from it. But I wanted to go back to, was it just the one time that he was actually physically abusive with you? It was just that one time, and then you said enough? No, it was...
No, the physical escalated. It started off with just throwing things, and it started, it kind of stayed there for a little bit. And then, it got physical with me, where he would punch me, or, he would punch me in the back, or, things like that. And then it got to a point where I would be gone and I wasn't home when he got home, and he would completely trash our bedroom and break things. And, he ended up taking a knife to the mattress and slashing a hole in it. I mean, it sort of escalated to there. And then it got to the ultimate.
Was he
violence.
the father? He was the father of your
Yeah.
your baby?
Yeah.
So do you guys still, does he still see the child, or?
No, after I left, I did file domestic violence charges against him, and which was a total waste of time. He got 26 weeks of anger management classes and a $25 fine. And even though they wouldn't even give me a restraining order because they said I wasn't in immediate danger. So, he was still stalking me. He was still harassing me. We had to go to parenting classes together. I ended up getting full custody of my daughter, and he was allowed visitation, but I didn't want to be in the same room with him, and according to the court order, I still had to tell him where I was at all times. And I said, no, I'm not putting my life in danger. And I'm not putting my daughter's life in danger. So I defied the court order, and I ended up shutting him off. And this was after he was still stalking me and harassing me and calling me at all hours of the day and night. And I said, I can't do this. If they want to come arrest me because he's harassing me, then fine, they can do that. So he eventually moved away, and I don't know where he is really. And I kept myself and my daughter safe.
Bravo for that. And you are lucky, because I know a lot of times in these situations, they refuse to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they want to make your life as much of a living hell as possible. So they really don't want to move on. And sometimes you have to take that as a blessing. Like, hey, he moved on and left us alone, which was probably the best thing that could have happened for you and for her, because it's highly traumatizing for a child to see those kinds of things.
Yeah. It was when I told him, you have no power over me anymore. I started talking back. I started acting out. I did not let him dictate my life anymore. And he did not like that. And I was to the point then where I thought, if you want to come after me again, come after me. I was ready to fight at that point, because I thought, you have tried to take away my life. You tried to take away my daughter's mom. No.
It's like a bully. They're like bullies. It's like, sometimes when you stand up, then it's like they're like, no, I don't want to fight that. But it's like, let me use intimidation as much as possible to get you in the place that I want you in, and then to hold you there. And it's disheartening, I think, when you look at, the mind of an abuser. And then I think too, like, sometimes when we look back into their past, we also see they've dealt with possibly abuse in their past or trauma in their past. And this goes to what you were saying, at the very beginning, that if people don't heal these places, it's going to manifest in the body. It's going to come out in these kinds of ways. And, anger is one of those emotions that it can come out. And I'm not at all saying this as like taking an abuser's side. It's just really sad, because it is what it is. But that doesn't give them any excuse or any reason to treat another human like that. I don't care what you've been through. It's your responsibility to get help through that healing process, through that trauma, so that you don't treat people like this, because that person doesn't deserve it. And this is, then you have generational trauma, because now your child is seeing this. And then, thank God you got away from him and from that situation. So take me on this healing journey. So you got away finally, and then it was a long process, right? It didn't happen overnight.
No, did not happen overnight. I am from a really small town. We and my family did not talk about trauma. My family has a long history of, keeping things in the family. We sweep it under the rug. We don't talk about it. So I really didn't know how to heal in the beginning. I just thought, okay, I'm out. I'm going to figure this out on my own. I don't have any tools, but okay, we're just going to wing it. And when I started having debilitating panic attacks, that's when I said, okay, something needs to shift here. And at the advice of my attorney, I did go to therapy. And I was in therapy for probably, I would say about a year. And I said, you know what, it's not working. I needed action. I didn't just want to go to an appointment and sit and talk. I wanted some actionable steps. I wanted things that I could do to, work through it. So a coworker introduced yoga, and I started doing that. And that was when I really felt peace in my body for the first time in years, because I become so disassociated with my body. You disconnect, you numb, because your body becomes so overwhelmed that you can't process anything. So yoga was my first step in really starting to understand that I can be quiet. I can sit in peace. I can close my eyes. It's okay. I'm safe now. And that, I mean, I learned how to breathe. I learned how to breathe again through yoga. I learned how to be able to close my eyes and meditate for longer than 10 seconds. You know, it was really this major healing modality for me. And I did that for a really long time, but it wasn't helping with the repressed memories. I was still having really high anxiety. I was still having nightmares. I was still having, you know, these flashbacks of things. I would, you know, go into a store and a smell would remind me of him. And I would just go into this panic mode. And I thought, okay, this isn't working. And I was seeing a health coach at the time, and she recommended self-inquiry. And I started doing that with a coach. And that was where we really got to the root of, hey, this is why I'm having this thought, you know, this thought of he's going to find me again. You know, he's going to finish what he started. I lived in fear for so long that I moved across the country, you know, because I thought he's going to find us. Moved across country, got a big dog, you know, like I was really living in fear, and self-inquiry took that.
People don't realize that that too is trauma. Like you're out of it. You're not physically in the proximity of being abused, but now you're fearing for your life. So that is still a period of trauma, and it's hard to heal through that when you're fearing for your life, or you're fearing for your daughter's life, or like, you know, I just kind of put this into perspective. I want my viewers and listeners to really take this into consideration. Walking into a home and not knowing, is somebody there waiting on me, or someone's going to jump me from behind, or walk into my car and getting in my car and not knowing if someone's going to, like, that's true in any circumstance. That could happen to anybody. That's a danger that we face every day, right? But when you are constantly thinking about that in your mind, that's traumatic. So 9 times out of 10, as we go about our day-to-day life, we're not thinking of those things. I'm not leaving the store and thinking someone could jump me from behind. But when you come out of a traumatic situation like this, and that's constant awareness, that's also traumatic.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're constantly scanning, you know, is somebody following me? And I still do that even to this day. Is someone following me? Is someone getting too close to my car? Is, you know, it does stay with you. And, you know, people take for granted that freedom of not having to worry about that. But when you've been through trauma, it's forefront of your mind. I mean, you really have to think, you know, is there impending danger here? So yeah, I would take my dog with me everywhere, just because I thought I put my sense of safety in him, because I did not know how to feel safe within myself.
Is there ways that you found in these circumstances, like you said, this is something that still is on the forefront of your mind? If you're out and about or whatever, you still catch yourself kind of looking behind your back. Is there things or ways that you kind of combat that say someone else is going through that right now as well? Is there any advice that you have about kind of how to tackle that?
Yeah, I think once you start to understand where that comes from, you know, for me, it was an understanding of this is coming from a place of fear where I was before. So what I do in that situation is I tell myself, okay, no, I'm safe. I'm safe right now. You know, I'm overreacting. It's okay. And then I just take a few deep breaths and I move on. It's not where before I wasn't able to do that. Before I would panic, I would park, I would go into like hyperventilation mode. But now that I understand where that fear and where that thought is coming from, it makes it a lot easier for me to kind of switch it off and say, no, okay, is it true? Is someone following me? Probably not. Okay. And then just sit with that for a second and then move. You know, that's what I do for most of the things that come up.
That's like, great advice.
Is this true?
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because sometimes just being able to talk ourselves down from things, but in order to talk yourself down from things, you have to have an awareness, like you said, of what's actually happening. And then you have to be able to have the calmness, which I think is what you're saying is this is what you learned through breath work and through yoga. And this is now what you help other people learn how to do. So as you have navigated this journey, like through the healing process, was there ever a period of time where you looked back and you thought, I'm not going to be able to heal from this? This is too much.
Oh yeah. Right in the beginning. Yeah. And for a period of about 5 or 6 years after that, I thought This is always going to be with me. I'm never going to be able to get over this. And especially right out of the gate. And I've actually talked to women who have said the same thing. They're like, I'm never going to be able to get over this. I've been through too much. And looking back on that, I get it. I get where that came from. But now my biggest piece of advice is yes, you can. Yes, you can. It does seem like an insurmountable task, though. It seems so overwhelming because your body is in such fight or flight at that point that you just can't process being able to actually move through something. You know, your brain just sort of shuts down, and that's to keep you safe. But looking back now, I can see why it took me so long to heal. And that is what I don't want women to go through now. You know, that's why I'm doing this, because I want to give that message that it doesn't have to take you 25 years like it took me. We can get this done in a much quicker amount of time.
Because there is a process of being able to navigate through these things. And I personally believe it's awesome to have a coach in every area of your life to help you move through things, especially in areas you're struggling with. People that struggle in fitness. Hey, you know what? Get a health coach that can help you move through fitness. People that struggle in health, they're sick or whatever, like, hey, help me get on a holistic plan. People that struggle with finances, get a financial coach. People that struggle with, business, get a business coach. I mean, I personally believe like that accelerates everything. So if you are struggling with some type of abuse or whatever, I think it's so valuable to be able to say, and now coaching is the beauty with online. I mean, there's a lot of negatives that come with everything being online, but the beauty of it now is you can actually find people that align 100% with you, your thoughts and opinions and views. And, the field is vast, as far as finding someone that truly aligns with you. So I think coaching is huge. And I think that you said something very valuable, which is this is why you got into this. And I would say 90% of the people that I interview here are doing what they're doing because they've been through something and they don't want other people to have to go through that thing. That's why I do what I do. So it's a beautiful thing that it's like turning the ashes into beauty. Like it was not a good place or time in your life, but you've somehow managed to overcome, and now you're reaching back and saying, I want to help the other people that are coming through this and be the person that I wish I had. So that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Is there anything else like throughout your healing journey that's kind of stands out in your mind that would be helpful maybe to someone who's listening that maybe trying to navigate that journey, kind of the steps to take or the things that, they're trying everything. Do you have any advice for that person?
Yeah. My whole spiel with this, with anybody that I talk to is if something isn't working for you, find what does. There were days during my whole healing journey has been up and down. There were hard days, there were easy days. Like it is difficult, first and foremost, like it's not going to be an easy journey, but it doesn't have to be hard. Like it doesn't have to be hard to heal once you find what works. And I just recommend trying different things. There's cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, there is EMDR, there is, there's yoga, there's nervous system regulation, which I also teach. And, once you find those things that work, that you enjoy, stick with that. It doesn't have to be the traditional route. That traditional route may work for you, and that's great if it does, stick with that. But if you're like, yeah, this isn't quite working for me, get in touch with the coach. Get in touch with someone who, aligns with you and say, hey, this isn't working for me. Like, what do you suggest? What do you do? And, try it out. This doesn't have to, nothing is one size fits all. So you really do have to try different things to see what works. And that's what I had to do. And I picked what worked the best to get certified in and teach.
So you mentioned quite a few things there. Can you talk a little bit about those different things and maybe your experience with those things, like the EMDR and you mentioned some other ones I don't know that I've heard of, like the nervous system regulation. Can you explain a little bit kind of what these modalities are and your experience with them?
Sure. So yeah, nervous system regulation is the first thing that I teach in my program, because when you are stuck in that sympathetic nervous system, your body can't take on anymore. It will not process. It will not think logically. So what nervous system regulation does is it trains your body to go from a sympathetic nervous system state to a parasympathetic nervous system state. So it goes from fight or flight to rest and digest. So once we start bringing the nervous system down and getting it regulated, you're not at that heightened state anymore. You're not in that, they call it allostatic load, where your body is just like so on edge all the time. So we bring that down, we get it, back to homeostasis, which is like your baseline. And then we can start working through some things. Then we can start, working through the heart of the trauma and going back and saying, okay, what are some thoughts that we have here? What are some limiting beliefs? And we can work through those and get rid of them because you're able to think clearly. So nervous system regulation, basically we do some techniques that go from sympathetic to parasympathetic. With EMDR, that is where you take eye movement. And what it does is it works both sides of the brain. So your brain can't think of the trauma. It basically rewires. It forms new neural pathways. So in my experience with that was like a spider web. You go in and you say, okay, I'm having this thought. And we start doing the therapy, the eye movements, or it could even just be bilateral tapping. And my therapist gave me a word and I would start having these thoughts of, okay, well now, wait, that thought started just a week ago, but now I'm thinking of something that went back 10 years ago. And wait, now before that was 30 years ago, so it really does. It's like the spider web of you get on one part of the web and it just kind of goes throughout and really gets to everything that's connected. And that's why I loved that so much, because one thought, like I'm not worthy, can affect everything on that web. So when you're able to clear that, you're able to clear the web and get to the heart of where did that actually come from. And it came when my dad left. I was 6. I'm 45. So, I had almost 40 years of wow. And I did not realize that. I thought, oh, well, this probably came from being bullied when I was in school. No, it came from that. I was able to pinpoint that moment with EMDR.
So when you go, let's take that for example. I want to expand on this just a little bit. So you take a thought that you had, that something, it's like a self-limiting thought or something that you're telling yourself on a regular basis that's really defining your identity and all the things that you're doing in the future, right? It's affecting everything. Then you start to find this spider web of thoughts or things or traumas that's led to that thing. How does finding that awareness clear?
Yeah, so some people, I know for me, we don't have an awareness. We walk around, but we don't have the thoughts that, oh, I'm not worthy of this. It just sort of happens things happen in our everyday lives, but we're not aware that we're having this thought. What happened with me at EMDR was I would go back to certain moments in my past and be able to connect that with, this is where my crappy self-esteem came from. This is what contributed to the thought of I'm not worthy. Because you go back to that thought and you're like, okay, well, what did I think then? And I thought, okay, well, maybe they just don't like me or, whatever these thoughts are. And then you're like, no, the major overarching belief is I'm not worthy. So EMDR really helped me pinpoint these themes of I'm not worthy. I have bad self-esteem. I'm not lovable. That was another big one for me, was I'm unlovable. I'm a burden. That was a huge one. So going backwards, it really helped to start define these moments that led up to that session. Really is like the easiest way I can explain it.
So I had a recent conversation with someone, and people will divulge, information to me. I don't know if it's because I do this podcast or I don't know, but I'm an empath, so maybe I just feel comfortable sharing things. But I recently had a conversation with someone, and this person was saying, I don't know that I've ever really been loved. And it's heartbreaking. Like, it broke my heart. But as I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor. I'm just someone who is passionate about helping people get healed. However, I've learned a lot from doing this podcast. That one stumped me a little bit. I'm like, I don't know how to tell you to get past that. But what I'm hearing you say, which you just said it, that this could be a mindset or even a subconscious thought. It's not even a conscious thought that comes to our heads, although in this person's case, it is a conscious thought that comes to their mind. But what you're saying is going back into the trail that led to that and then talking through, like, self-talk through why you feel the way that you feel. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yeah. So the whole thing with, I don't know if I've ever been loved, that's going to stem from childhood. Yeah. There was something more than likely that happened in childhood. And as kids, we don't have a frame of reference. We just have feelings, like, oh, this person doesn't love me, or this person doesn't like me, or, we're not aware of, these phrases like burden and, unlovable, things like that. Like we have a very limited vocabulary at that point. So we just put these feelings on them. And then these feelings, eventually, as we get older, they will manifest in other ways. So the thought, I don't know if I've ever been loved, is probably going to go back to not feeling loved by a parent or someone who was close to them. A lot of it goes back to having an attachment wound. I know I've met a lot of people who have the same thought or have avoidant issues too, because they didn't have that relationship with their parents where they felt like nurtured and loved and supported. So yeah, I mean, it would be helpful in that situation to go back and just, kind of follow the crumbs back.
Yeah. Do you think that sometimes parents, and I'm asking this mainly for myself, being a parent myself, raising I've got a teenager and then one that's about to be 10. And I wonder sometimes, like, just the things that we say to our kids can define. So in that situation, for example, if you had a parent that constantly was like, it's really hard to find someone to love you. And then as a kid, your brain latches onto that. And you're like, yeah, I don't think I'll ever find anyone that loves me. I mean, I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but the brain is such a dynamic thing. It's hard to fully understand, really. I mean, I don't even think that we've tapped into half of the understanding of the brain and how we store things in the brain. I mean, there's a lot of scientific evidence and things, but it's fascinating to me. And I would love to know more and get to the bottom of it. And even through doing this, I've tapped into a lot of my own trauma, and sometimes maybe not knowing how to move through it or figure it out, but just knowing that you have that, like, hey, I have this issue with my trauma. I have this relationship with my trauma that I need to get rid of. And now it's just a journey of figuring out how to move through that. So I noticed in back behind you, you have the sound bowls. That's the sound bowls, right?
Yeah. Yep. I've got my bowls. There's a whole set back there.
Talk to us a little bit about that, because that's a healing modality in and of itself, is the frequency of sound, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I really don't know much about. So I'm very intrigued by that as well. But how does that work?
I'm actually right now getting certified in sound healing. So I really can't speak too intelligently on it. There are so everything is vibration, right? Our bodies are vibration. Money it's an energy exchange, right? Everything is energy. Everything is vibration. What sound healing does is, and I have crystal bowls as well, and I have my metal bowls. If they're attuned to a certain frequency, they start to work with different energy centers in the body, chakras. I don't know if you're familiar with that. So a certain frequency will work with certain energy centers in the body. And what I found with sound healing is it puts me in kind of not a trance, but it really helps me relax and just feel that energy. And this is going to sound kind of woo-woo to some people, but I'm all into the woo-woo.
The woo-woo it's real. I mean, it does work.
The woo-woo is real. Yeah, definitely, because everything is energy. And you can also do binaural beats with these bowls, and which that is almost the same as EMDR. It works both sides of your brain. So it's really helping to rewire, the neural pathways and really helping the brain sort of take a chill pill. So that's why I love sound healing so much. And with these bowls, you can actually put them on you and put them on like a certain chakra, and the frequency, you can feel it like resonate through your whole body. It's amazing.
Wow. What do you think of listening to? So sometimes when I sleep, I'll listen to like the binaural, am I saying that right? The binaural beats?
Binaural beats, yeah.
Yeah, or I listen to just honestly, like this is going to sound strange, and maybe not to you, but to some, but I think it feels good to my brain. Like I think it's
Mhm.
actually like a massage to my brain
Yeah.
to listen to some of that. And I had an experience with energy healing when I come out of my divorce. I was distraught and had been through, a lot. And I had a friend that introduced me to an energy healer, and she's like, "You got to go check this out. Like this is a real deal." And I'm a Christian, so I was like a little bit like, I don't know, feel about this. I don't know if
Yeah.
this is contrary to God. Like I prayed about it and I ended up going. And the results were astounding, honestly. I'm just going to be honest. I was like blown away. The things that it brought up, the dreams that I had afterwards, the healing that I experienced through it. And I went on this whole journey of like, what is this? Like I was raised in church. I don't know if this is really like right to do, but it works. And this is actually very biblical. I think if you look into, I mean, I don't know how you feel about God or scripture, but I started reading scripture, I'm like, this is real stuff. And it's stuff that is put into the universe since the beginning of the universe, that it's how we all function inside of the world that we live in. We are living beings, but we're in this world, and the whole, like, you said it too, the whole energy, everything, it's everywhere. It's in
Hmm.
everything. It's in
Yeah.
a desk. It's in the trees. It's in
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So I don't know, if it does sound woo woo to some people, I can honestly attest, like, it is worth doing a little studying on and checking it out, because there is something when you can tap into that. And I truly believe in the power of sound and the power of vibration. And, there's things that happen inside of our brain that our brain is constantly telling everything how to work, right? It's telling our hearts to pump, like unknowingly, like I'm not thinking about that. It tells us to breathe when it's time to breathe. It tells us all these things. But what's telling our brain? It's like we also have to tell our brain, think a different thought or focus on something different. Or so it's vast to explore these things, but it's very helpful. So I'd encourage
Hmm.
anybody going through stuff, tap into these things, because it is helpful. Do you think with these things though that it's like working out? It's not something you can do one time and be healed, or is it?
It would depend on the situation. I wouldn't say one time will, heal you. But if you're finding yourself caught up in like this, anxiety, or like this, a vortex, you're just, sort of spinning out, it can be really helpful to listen to a sound bath, or, to listen to binaural beats, or something along that line, because the frequency does shift your brain. Everything in our bodies relies on energy. I mean, we have electrical impulses in our bodies. That's how our nervous system works. And only 20% of our nervous system input is brain down. So that means coming from the brain to the body. Only 20%. Other 80% is external coming in. So it's like ground to brain. So that is, external things like sound coming in, and that 80% of that goes directly to our brain. So when we start doing things like sound baths, we're basically realigning all of that energy in our body. That's why they say, high vibe, low vibe. That's what that means. And when you are on a low vibe, that's what you are going to attract. And when you're high vibe, that means you're in a state of happy joy. The energy around you is high. So yeah, I mean, I would say if you really wanted, sound healing is one of those things where you can do it once and feel great. But it's also one of those things where for me, I got kind of addicted to it. It was like, I would just, and Reiki too, I'm like, man, it's almost like you get a dopamine hit from doing the sound baths. And that's kind of what led me to going down that rabbit hole with my bowls. Is I love the sound. I love the way it makes me feel.
And I agree with you 100%. That's the reason I started listening to it. Because sometimes I've never been diagnosed with like ADD or ADHD, but I feel like I have it because my brain is constantly racing. I have a lot of racing thoughts. I constantly have ideas. One of my big downfalls is I'll get started on something, and then I get distracted and get do something else. And I'm trying to get better at that.
Same.
But the brain doing that, like constantly racing, sometimes finding that peace of just like, I don't want to think, I don't want to be influenced to think of anything. So I don't want to listen to like a motivational speech. I don't want to be influenced by that. I think that we are created to have everything that we need is already inside of us. And so that all we have to do is reflect inward. And it's like, if I'm going to reflect inward, I don't want to influence my thoughts. I just want to be alone with my thoughts. Therefore, that sound or those beats or, sometimes it's just it's relaxation. That's why I feel like it's almost like a massage for the brain, because you're relaxing your brain into this place of just, I'm not thinking of anything. I can't explain it. Go check it out for yourself. If you're listening, like, I don't know, I can't explain it. Just go check it out. I let my kids listen to it one day. I was like, listen, we're in the car and I'm like, turn on this. I don't know if it's binaural beats, but it was like this sound frequencies, right? And I'm like, listen to this. Doesn't this sound like a massage to your brain? And they're like, you're weird, Mom. I'm like, no, like, listen, it does. It becomes addictive. It's like
real. Yeah. Yeah. It's real. Yeah.
One day you'll appreciate this when you get older. Right now they're into their music and, whatever. But,
yeah.
But it's true.
I get that.
So your daughter now is how old?
She is 24. She'll be 25 in May.
So you went through this really young then.
I was 20. Yeah. 18
Yeah.
to 22 was when I was dealing with, I call him stupid, my abuser. I was dealing with him. Yeah. And then I eventually met my now husband, and I have an amazing life now.
Yeah. So a true testament to what is out there, like what can happen. In the moment, it feels so daunting. Like, we're in this moment. It feels like you can never get over it. I talk to people on a regular basis. They're like, it feels like I'm going backwards. I'm taking one. And it's not just domestic abuse. Sometimes it's just trauma in general. But it feels like this when we're going through it. But I want to ask you, like, looking back to that time, could you have ever imagined that this level of healing and this level of contentment and happiness and thriving on the other side of that trauma, could you have ever imagined that it would be this good?
Not at all. Back then, it was just about surviving. It was just about taking one day at a time, one step at a time. I couldn't really look forward into the future too far because that was scary. I had ideas, I had thoughts of what I wanted to do, but I didn't know if I would ever be healed enough to do them. I mean, I eventually did some really great things. I mean, I put myself through college. I raised my daughter. I got remarried. Well, I wasn't married in the first place, but I got married. I have another son. I mean, I have a son. And back then, I was just more concerned about getting through the day.
And sometimes that's okay when you're in the middle.
Sometimes that's okay.
Yeah. When you're in the middle of trauma, sometimes it's like, I just need to make it to the next hour and the next, sometimes it takes that. But the positive to that is, if you stay on a healing journey, you will figure out how to heal. And sometimes you got to be proactive. I tell people, I think you got to be proactive about it. It's never easy. It takes work, but in the end, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, and you created a beautiful life. So I hope that encourages a lot of people that are listening.
Yeah. And sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you can't see the forest for the trees. And you are in that spot of, I just want to make it through today. I just want to wake up without having anxiety. I just want to go to bed at night and not have nightmares. And that's perfectly fine. If that's the one thing that you're working on, then give it your all. It does take time. There's many steps to it, and it's okay. Your healing journey is yours. It doesn't have to be in someone else's timeline. One of the things that used to drive me crazy when people would say, well, you're not over that yet. Like, you're still, that still bothers you. Well, yeah, it does, Yeah,
please don't say that. If you're listening to this, please don't ever say that to someone who's going through some stuff.
That's please
so
don't. Because it is. And it's really hurtful because it feels like judgment. It's like we've been judged for so long already as it is. To have that judgment from people who are supposed to love us and support us, it really hurts. And it really makes us feel invalidated. Like, what we went through wasn't traumatic. Like what we went through was nothing. We should be over it by now. So we should all over ourselves, and it doesn't do anybody any good, and it certainly doesn't do you any good on your healing, because then
And
now
the
you've just put yourself on a timeline, and there is no real timeline for healing.
and the truth of this is probably everybody else is still dealing with their trauma too. The problem is people can't see into other people's trauma. I can only speak about the types of trauma that I've experienced. And when I look at other people's trauma, I'm like, yeah, you should be able to get over that. I mean, I might have that thought in my mind. I would never say that to someone, but but who am I to judge? They might look at me and say, gosh, Amber, you should be over these things by now. Who are we to judge? Like, why not handle things in more empathetically and compassionately? That, I understand that different people handle different things differently. You have a whole, I'm 45 too. And so when you're like, I have a whole 45 years worth of stuff built up. So if I react or if I don't heal exactly like on your timeline, but I think it just comes back to this whole thing of, handling things with empathy and understanding that everybody's journey is different and just being compassionate in that. Because if we're honest, everybody's got something that they're holding on to or something they're struggling with getting over. And maybe there's shame around that. They don't want to say it. Maybe someone's been divorced for, 50 years and they say they're still not over it, but they don't want to talk about it because there's a shame attached to that. And it's like, so if we're being honest, everybody has those things that they attach to and that they have a hard time getting over. I fully believe nobody has their shit together. Like,
yeah,
we're all just navigating through life, trying to figure it out. So I think sometimes there's peace in knowing that as well for someone struggling through things like, hey, I might look at you or this person or that person and I might think they have all their stuff together, but life is still a journey. We're still here.
Yeah. 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 Social media is good for that. If you can, anywhere on social media, you can look and you can say, oh man, I wish I had that person's life, but you have no idea what that person is going through. People only see what they want you to see. So to stand in judgment of someone else is a reflection of you. It is a reflection of how you feel about yourself. And if you are going to judge someone else, look in the mirror, because
So
what
good.
are you not healing yourself?
That's right. And
What
instead
is
of
still
worrying,
stuck in you?
yeah, and instead of worrying about somebody else getting healed, like worry about healing yourself. That's so good.
Right.
That's so
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, we are a reflection of the people around us. So if you're judgy wudgy and you're standing out there judging everybody, that says more about you than it says about the other person.
That's good. So if you had a kind of a big final takeaway here as far as what you would offer advice, what would that be?
Biggest piece of advice that I offer people is don't drop anchor in victimhood. There is so much more life out there. Yes, it happened. Yes, it's the past. You have a whole future that you can now design. If you work through what happened, work through the trauma, go through the steps, go through the process, I promise you there is hope. You are not alone. You can make it to the other side and your life can absolutely be whatever you want it to be. I've designed this life.
I'm going to have to use that. Don't drop your anchor in victimhood. That's powerful.
Do not drop anchor in victimhood.
I need some of your tagline. I love it. I love it. That's catchy. I'm like, I may have to steal that. If you see that, it's my tagline. Don't judge me. I'm just joking.
Oh, I'll have to hurry up and copyright it.
That's right. Or I'll have to make it a quote that Danielle Young said this.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. So real fast, tell my audience where they can learn more about you, find more about your programs, and if someone is in the midst of that, where do they get started with you?
My website would be the very first place I would go. There's a whole lot on there. I have some free resources that I have a free guide that you can get. It's 3 ways to reclaim your power after trauma. Totally free. And if you want more support in your healing journey, there's a place where you can book a strategy call with me. It's totally free. We can talk and figure out where you are, where you want to be, and how I can best support you to get there.
I love it. And you're doing amazing things. And I know that you're giving purpose to your pain because you've went through it. You've healed from it. You are now helping other people thrive on the other side of this trauma and this hurt and this pain. And so I love what you're doing, and just keep doing the good work.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm going to keep doing it.
Thank you for
Gonna keep
coming
doing
on
it
today.
until
And
we're all seen and heard.
yeah. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge. I really appreciate having you on today and you taking the time to share all of this with us.
Thank you for having me on. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Through the Trauma podcast. If you have found value in this episode or believe in the mission behind what we are doing, please subscribe so that you never miss any future episodes. Also, be sure to check out our transformation project at transformationthroughtraumaproject.com, where we help inspirational stories get heard on a larger scale through multiple platforms. If you know someone who can benefit from this episode, please share it with them. Until next time.